Let's talk about the Zodiac Killer, and let's talk about a specific question. Did this person have a god complex? It's a term we throw around a lot. It means someone thinks they're above everyone else. They believe they have the right to control others, to judge them, even to decide if they live or die. It's more than just a big ego, it's a deep belief in one's own superiority and authority. When you look at the Zodiac, his actions, his words, it's hard not to see this complex at the very core of who he was. This wasn't just about killing, it was about creating a persona, a myth. A myth where he was the central figure, a dark god playing with the lives of mortals. To understand this, you have to start with the letters. The murders were the acts, but the letters were the manifesto. They were his way of speaking to the world, of explaining his own terrible importance. Without the letters, he would have been another phantom, another unsolved killer. With the letters, he became a character. He became the Zodiac. And in those letters, he lays out his worldview, his justification, his own self-made religion. One of the first things you notice is his tone. It's not the tone of a madman who has lost control. It's the tone of someone who is completely in control. He's arrogant, he's condescending. He taunts the police, calling them stupid and incompetent. He gives them clues, but they are wrapped in ciphers and riddles. And he's not just trying to evade capture, he's playing a game he invented, where he sets all the rules. This is a classic trait of someone with a god complex. They see themselves as intellectually superior to everyone else, especially those in authority. The police, the press, the public, they were all just pieces on his board. He was the one moving them. He enjoyed watching them scramble, watching them fail. Every mistake they made was proof of his genius. Every headline was a testament to his power. He even dictated what the newspapers had to print. He demanded his ciphers be published on the front page, or else he would kill again. Think about that. He wasn't just committing a crime and running away, he was directing the media narrative. He was forcing the most powerful institutions in the city to become his mouthpiece. He was making them unwilling participants in his performance. A god doesn't just act, a god demands tribute. He demands to be seen and heard. For the Zodiac, front page coverage was his tribute. Then there's the name itself. He didn't just sign his letters as the killer. He chose the Zodiac. This wasn't a random choice. The Zodiac is a celestial concept. It's about fate, destiny, the stars, the cosmic order of things. By naming himself this, he was elevating himself from a common murderer to a force of nature. He was no longer just a man with a gun. He was an elemental power, an agent of fate. He was aligning himself with the universe itself. It's a statement of immense grandiosity. He was claiming a place among the heavens, looking down on the small, insignificant people below. And what did this self-proclaimed cosmic being want? This is where it gets even more disturbing and revealing. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about revenge against specific people. He made his motive very clear in his letters. He was collecting slaves for the afterlife. He wrote, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is they. When I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all that I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." Let's break that down. He created his own theology. He invented an entire religious system with one purpose: to justify his actions and secure his power for eternity. In his version of the afterlife, paradise, he wouldn't be judged. He would be a master. He would be a king. He would be a god. His victims were not people to him. They were objects. They were property. They were souls to be collected, like stamps or coins. This is the ultimate expression of a god complex. It is the belief that other human beings exist solely for your use and benefit, even beyond death. He saw himself as a hunter, and people as his prey. He even calls man the most dangerous on 'em all, which frames his killing as a sport, a challenge worthy of his superior skills. But the final part, the collection of slaves, is what sets him apart. Most killers are focused on the here and now. Their motives are earthly. The Zodiac's motives were eternal. He was building an empire in the next world, an empire populated by the people he murdered. This fantasy gave his crimes a sense of grand purpose. He wasn't just a murderer, he was a creator, a founder of his own celestial kingdom. His crimes were not just acts of violence, they were rituals, they were performances. The most chilling example of this is the attack at Lake Berryessa. He didn't just walk up and shoot the victims. He approached them wearing a bizarre hooded costume. It was a black executioner's hood, and on his chest he had drawn the Zodiac symbol, the crosshairs. He was no longer a man, he was an icon. He was the character he had created. This costume served a purpose. It was about terror, yes, but it was also about theater. He was performing a role, the role of the omnipotent judge and executioner. He spoke to the victims calmly, tying them up, telling them what he was going to do. He was in complete control of the situation. He wasn't frenzied. He was deliberate. He was acting out a scene from his own dark play. After stabbing them, he walked over to their car and drew the Zodiac symbol on the door. He was signing his work like an artist. This wasn't a messy, passionate crime. It was a cold, staged ceremony. It was the act of a being who believes his actions have symbolic meaning. He wasn't just killing two people. He was making a statement. He was reinforcing his brand. He was performing his godhood. The very nature of his attack speaks to this need for control and power. He often attacked couples in isolated places. These were moments of intimacy, of vulnerability. He shattered those moments. He turned a peaceful scene into a place of horror. By doing this, he was asserting his dominance over the most basic human connections. He was showing that he had the power to destroy love, to destroy peace, to destroy life itself, whenever he chose. A god is often seen as a being who can give life, but a dark god is one who revels in the power to take it away. The Zodiac reveled in it. He wrote about how fun it was. His threats also escalated to a godlike scale. He didn't just threaten individuals, he threatened society as a whole. He talked about shooting up a school bus full of children. He wrote, "I shall just wipe out a school bus some morning." He threatened to set off a bomb and wipe out a whole city block. This is the language of a terrorist, but it's also the language of a vengeful deity from an old story. A god who can bring down plagues, who can smite entire cities. He wanted people to feel a widespread ambient fear. He wanted everyone to know that he could strike anywhere, anytime, and that no one was safe. This feeling of collective dread was what fed his ego. A god's power is measured by how many people fear him. By this measure, the Zodiac felt very powerful indeed. But there's another side to this. A true god doesn't need to brag. A truly powerful being doesn't need to constantly send letters to the press demanding attention. Or a truly superior intellect doesn't need to beg for its puzzles to be solved. And this is where the Zodiac's god complex starts to look a little different. It starts to look fragile. It starts to look like a desperate compensation for something else. What if the man behind the mask, behind the letters, was a nobody? What if he was a man who felt powerless in his everyday life? A man who was ignored, disrespected, or considered a failure. This is a common profile for killers of this type. They feel insignificant, so they create a second identity, an alter ego. That is the opposite of everything they are. An identity that is powerful, feared, and famous. The Zodiac persona was his creation. It was his masterpiece. In his real life, he might have had a boss he hated, a family who didn't understand him, or no friends at all. He might have been a man nobody listened to. But as the Zodiac, everyone listened. The police listened, the mayor listened, the newspapers listened, the entire San Francisco Bay Area listened. For a man who felt invisible, this must have been an incredible rush. So, was it a true god complex, or was it the ultimate fantasy of a profoundly insecure person? The answer is probably both. The fantasy was born from the insecurity. He built this grandiose, godlike persona to cover up a deep-seated feeling of worthlessness. A real god is self-assured. The Zodiac was needy, he needed validation, he needed the headlines. He needed people to be talking about him. He even got angry when the police and press seemed to lose interest for a while, sending letters to reignite the fear and put himself back in the spotlight. Think about the ciphers again. On one level, creating a secret code is a godlike act. You are creating a new form of language. But on another level, you are desperately hoping someone will solve it. You want them to solve it so they can see how clever you are. You want the praise. He gave them the key to one of his ciphers. He wanted them to read his message. He wanted them to understand his greatness. This need for an audience, this need for recognition betrays the insecurity at the heart of the persona. He also claimed credit for attacks he may not have committed. He wanted his body count to be as high as possible. He would write his name and a number on his letters, like a scoreboard. Zodiac 12, SFPD 0. This isn't the behavior of a cosmic force. This is the behavior of a child who wants to win a game. He was obsessed with his legacy, with how he would be remembered. He was curating his own myth, and he wanted the numbers to be impressive. The god complex was real, but it was a construct. It was a suit of armor he wore. Inside that armor was likely a very small, very angry, and very pathetic man. The Zodiac was his escape from that reality. In the world he created, he wasn't John Doe, the guy who works a dead-end job. He was the Zodiac, the master of life and death, the collector of slaves for paradise. This duality is what makes him so fascinating and so terrifying. We are not just looking at a monster. We are looking at a human being who chose to become a monster because he couldn't stand being himself. He couldn't find power or meaning in the real world, so he manufactured it through violence and terror. He anointed himself a god because he felt like a peasant. His desire for control was absolute. He controlled the crime scenes, he controlled the flow of information, he controlled the emotional state of an entire region. This obsession with control is often a sign of someone who feels they have no control over their own life. Killing was the ultimate act of control. He could decide the most important thing about another person's existence when it ended. In that moment, holding a weapon over a helpless victim, he must have felt the omnipotence he craved. For a few terrifying minutes, he was God. And then, after the act, he would go back to his normal life. He would go back to being a nobody. The contrast must have been jarring. This is why the letters were so important. They allowed him to continue being the Zodiac even when he wasn't killing. The letters kept the fantasy alive. They kept his godhood in the public consciousness. As long as people were afraid of the Zodiac, he was real. He was powerful. So, did the Zodiac Killer have a god complex? Yes, absolutely. It was the central driving force behind everything he did. He created a persona, a theology, and a public spectacle, all designed to prove his own divine importance. He saw other people not as human beings, but as props in his grand drama, or as souls to be harvested for his private afterlife. He appointed himself judge, jury, and executioner, but it was a hollow godhood. It was a brittle fantasy built on a foundation of deep personal failure and insecurity. He was a god who needed a newspaper to tell him he existed. He was a master of the universe who was likely living a very small, very lonely life. The entire Zodiac saga is the story of a man who tried to become a god and, in the process, only proved how terribly, tragically human he was. His rage, his ego, his need for attention, these are not the qualities of a divine being. They are the cries of a lost and broken person, a person who chose to build his heaven on top of other people's graves. The myth he created has lasted for decades, which is perhaps the only victory he ever truly achieved. He made himself infamous, but he never became a god. He just became a ghost, a symbol of how the desire for power can twist a human soul into something unrecognizable.